The throne chamber of Queen Zyra was a place of fear and silence. Tall pillars of black stone reached high into the endless shadows above. Strange alien fires burned along the walls, casting red light across the cold floor. The air itself felt heavy, filled with a pressure that made even strong warriors tremble. Into this chamber walked a single human, Captain Marcus Hale. His boots echoed against the stone as he stepped forward. Every guard in the chamber turned their heads, their glowing eyes following him. They were tall, armored creatures, loyal to their queen and ready to strike at her command. But none moved, for in Marcus's hands rested the cursed blade. The weapon was unlike any other. Its dark metal shimmered as if it drank the light around it. Ancient runes glowed faintly along its edge, whispering in a language older than stars. Stories said the blade was forged in the void and bound to the soul of whoever carried it. It was not just a weapon, it was a curse. Queen Zyra sat upon her throne of twisted bone and crystal. Her eyes blazed with silver fire, and her presence filled the chamber with terror. She had ruled star systems for centuries, feared across the galaxy as both conqueror and goddess. When Marcus stopped before her, the silence deepened. Her voice broke it, sharp and cold like the cut of steel. "You dare return to me with that blade," she said. Her voice echoed through the chamber, carrying both fury and something else, something close to fear. The cursed weapon had been stolen from her empire years ago, and with it, her dominion had begun to weaken. Now, against all odds, the human stood before her, offering it back. Marcus lifted the blade higher. His eyes were steady, his expression calm, but inside his heart raced like thunder. He knew what this moment meant. The galaxy believed no one could face Queen Zyra in life. And yet here he was, a single human in the heart of her empire. "I bring back what is yours," Marcus said. His voice was firm, though he knew every word could be his last. He stepped forward and placed the cursed blade at the foot of her throne. The weapon hummed as it touched the stone, and a ripple of energy spread through the chamber. The guards stiffened, the fires dimmed, and even the air grew colder. Queen Zyra rose slowly from her throne. Her long robes flowed like liquid night, and her silver eyes locked onto Marcus. She descended the steps one by one, her every movement graceful yet deadly. When she reached the blade, she extended her hand. The weapon seemed to leap toward her, as if eager to be reunited with its master. The moment her fingers closed around the hilt, the curse awakened. A shockwave tore through the chamber, cracking stone and shaking the very foundations. The fires roared higher, shadows twisted, and the whispers of the blade grew louder. The guards fell to their knees, covering their ears, but Queen Zyra only smiled. Her smile was not of joy, but of hunger, the hunger of power returning. "You fool," she whispered, her voice filled with dark delight. "You have returned to me not just my weapon, but my wrath." The cursed blade pulsed with her anger, feeding on it, growing stronger with every heartbeat. For centuries, she had been bound, her powers sealed away by the blade's absence. Now, with it back in her hand, her strength surged, shaking the stars beyond the chamber walls. Marcus stood tall, though he felt the crushing weight of her power. He had known this would happen. He had known the risk. And yet, behind his calm face, he carried a secret. This was not just a return. It was the beginning of something far greater. For humanity had never been mere prey, and the queen was about to learn why. The chamber filled with her laughter, a sound like shattering glass. She raised the blade high, and its dark light spilled across the walls. Every guard chanted her name, their voices trembling with both worship and terror. The galaxy would feel her wrath once again. But Marcus did not bow. He did not kneel. He only watched. And in his eyes, the fire of defiance burned. The return of the blade was not the end. It was the beginning of war, and the stars themselves would soon shake under the weight of wrath and resistance. The blade was now in the queen's hands, and its hunger stirred across the chamber. It pulsed like a living heart, every beat sending waves of energy that rattled the very stones. The whispers in the air grew louder, words not meant for mortal ears, a language of curses and promises. The guards shifted uneasily, though they tried to hide their fear, for even the Queen's loyal warriors could feel the darkness wrapping itself around their minds. Queen Zyra's silver eyes glowed brighter, almost blinding. She lifted the blade above her head, and the whispers became screams. Through the palace windows, the skies of her world darkened, as if the stars themselves were bowing to her wrath. Lightning tore across the heavens, and entire cities trembled in terror as the curse announced its return. Marcus stood firm, though the ground shook beneath him. He could feel the weight of 1,000 voices pressing against his thoughts. They promised him power, glory, and eternal life if he would kneel. But he ignored them, focusing only on the Queen. She was changing before his eyes, her body merging with the weapon's aura. Her skin shimmered like obsidian glass, her hair flowed like fire, and her voice carried the echo of countless souls bound within the blade. "Do you feel it, human?" she asked, her tone a mixture of triumph and venom. "The curse is alive. It feeds on me. It feeds on the galaxy itself, and now nothing can stand against my wrath." Her laughter echoed so loudly that even the distant mountains heard it, and far beyond her throne world, other systems felt the shockwaves. The ancient machines of her empire, dormant war engines buried for centuries, began to awaken, their eyes glowing with cursed fire. On forgotten planets, monuments cracked and released long-sealed armies. The galaxy was stirring, answering her call. Marcus clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had known the blade would return her power, but not at this scale. Entire civilizations could be crushed in days if she unleashed what was now awakening. Yet he did not falter, because in his heart he knew that this was not just her power. The curse was not her slave. It was something else, something that could turn on her if guided by the right hand. The Queen stepped down from her throne, every step shaking the floor. Her guards pressed their heads low, some trembling, some whispering prayers in fear. She raised the blade and pointed it toward Marcus. "You brought this to me," she declared, her voice booming like thunder. "You carried it across the void, through war, through blood, and through fire, and now it is mine again." She paused, smiling cruelly. "For that, I should let you live, for a time, so that you may witness the galaxy burning, star by star, world by world, until only ash remains." The cursed blade pulsed again, and Marcus felt its weight even from a distance. His mind swam with visions of destruction, oceans boiling, suns collapsing, endless screams. He staggered but forced himself back upright, his voice steady though his body trembled. "If you believe this weapon will make you a goddess, then you are wrong," he said. "The blade does not serve you, Queen Zyra. It never has. It only serves its curse, and you are just another prisoner bound by it." For the first time, her smile faltered. It was only for a second, but Marcus saw it, and it gave him strength. He knew her pride was her weakness, and the truth could cut deeper than any blade. The whispers grew louder around her, wrapping tighter, feeding on her anger. Her hand gripped the weapon so hard that blood ran down her palm, but still she refused to let it go. "I am no prisoner," she roared, her voice shaking the chamber. "I am wrath itself, and with this blade, I will remind the galaxy who rules it." She swung the blade, and a wave of black fire surged outward. The walls cracked, the fires in the chamber extinguished, and even time itself seemed to stutter. Marcus barely shielded his face as the wave crashed past him. The guards fell screaming, their armor melting, their bodies turning to dust as the curse consumed them. Yet Marcus still stood, bruised and bleeding, but alive. Zyra narrowed her eyes, her fury now mixed with curiosity. "You survive even this," she whispered. Perhaps humanity is not as fragile as I thought, but it will not save you. She turned away, her attention now drawn to the stars beyond her palace. The blade pulsed in her grip, eager, wild, alive. And as she raised it toward the sky, the curse answered. Across the galaxy, ships powered by the curse lit up like burning suns. Armadas that had slumbered for centuries reawakened, their cannons glowing with dark fire. On distant worlds, slaves of her empire cried out as chains of energy wrapped around their bodies, binding them once more. The queen was reforging her dominion, not through armies of flesh, but through the curse that spread like a plague. Marcus watched, his heart heavy, but his resolve stronger than ever. He knew the war had already begun, and humanity's only chance was to uncover the truth of the cursed blade. This was no longer just about survival, it was about defiance. If the queen's wrath shook the stars, then humanity would become the fire that refused to be extinguished. And so the curse awakened, and with it, the galaxy trembled. But in the shadows of wrath, hope still flickered in the heart of one human. The story of resistance had only just begun. The galaxy was trembling under the weight of Queen Zyra's wrath. The cursed blade sang with her anger, and entire fleets reawakened in her name. Worlds that had begun to forget her rule now remembered it with fear. Her voice echoed through the stars like thunder, a promise of fire and chains. But in the shadows of her growing empire stood humanity, scattered, outnumbered, yet unbroken. On the outer rim of the galaxy, far from her throne, resistance was already forming. Ships gathered in secret hangars, soldiers trained in hidden bunkers, and leaders whispered plans under the cover of static-filled signals. Among them was Captain Marcus Hale, the man who had carried the cursed blade into the Queen's hands. Though many blamed him, many also saw in him a spark that could not be ignored. Marcus stood aboard a battered human warship, its hull scarred by old battles. Through the window of the command deck, he watched the stars burn in the distance, the Queen's curse spreading like wildfire. His crew looked to him with silent questions, fear mixed with hope. They wanted to know if they had a chance, if resistance was anything more than suicide. Marcus did not speak of victory. He spoke only of defiance. "We are not her slaves," he said, his voice steady though the weight of guilt pressed on him. "We will not bow to her blade or her curse, and if the stars must shake, then let them shake with our fight, not our surrender." The crew stood taller, their fear tempered by his words. For though Marcus was only a man, he carried something that no curse could extinguish, the unyielding will of humanity. Beyond the warship, whispers spread across other species. The Queen's wrath had awakened old scars, reminding countless worlds of their chains. Some feared her return, but others remembered the taste of rebellion. Small fires of defiance began to rise across the galaxy, faint but growing. And at the center of it all, humanity became the voice that refused to be silenced. The Queen, from her throne of shadow, felt this defiance. The cursed blade pulsed in her hand, whispering warnings, whispering hunger. Her fleets crushed resistance where they could, entire colonies burned to ash. But still, the humans did not break, and their allies did not scatter. Zyra mocked them as insects before a storm. Yet in the back of her mind, doubt grew. She remembered the look in Marcus's eyes, the fire of a man who had stood before her and not bowed. Marcus himself carried the burden of that moment. He knew the galaxy saw him as both traitor and hero, the man who returned the blade, but also the man who still stood against it. Every night, when silence filled his cabin, he heard the whispers of the blade inside his mind. It called to him across the void, tempting him, promising him that he could wield its curse against her. But Marcus resisted, for he knew that the curse never served. It only consumed. His fight was not for power, it was for freedom. On the fringes of human space, Marcus led raids against the Queen's fleets. Quick strikes, hit-and-run battles that shattered supply lines and freed prisoners. Each victory was small, Yet each one lit another flame of defiance. Soon, entire systems began sending word to him, pledging fighters, ships, and secrets. The resistance was no longer just whispers, it was becoming an army. Yet Marcus knew the truth. Against the Queen's cursed fleets, no army of flesh could win. If they were to stand a chance, they needed something more. Knowledge older than the curse, a secret deeper than her power. And so his journey was not only war, it was also a search for the hidden history of the blade, for the truth that even the Queen feared. In the dark halls of her palace, Zyra felt the resistance grow. She raised the blade, its whispers now screams, urging her to end it quickly. But she did not strike yet, for part of her hungered to see Marcus broken, to watch the fire in his eyes extinguished by despair. She declared across the stars that humanity would fall. But the galaxy also heard Marcus, the lone human who dared to speak against her. His words spread faster than her fire, carried by those who believed. And so the stage was set. The Queen with her cursed power and endless fleets. The human with his unbroken will and a growing rebellion. The galaxy itself held its breath. For the curse had awakened wrath, but humanity had awakened defiance. This was no longer just survival. This was a battle for the soul of the stars. And even as the Queen's wrath shook the heavens, Marcus Hale whispered to his crew the words that would echo across history. We may not win, but we will fight, and if the stars burn, let them burn with our defiance. The galaxy was no longer quiet. Every world could feel the tension, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Queen Zyra's cursed blade had awakened fleets long forgotten, machines of war that once slept beneath deserts, oceans, and mountains. Now they rose into the skies of countless worlds, answering her call, their weapons glowing with dark fire. Her voice spread through the void like a storm, promising conquest, chains, and eternal rule. But humanity did not vanish into silence. They gathered, not in the open where her fleets could strike, but in the shadows. Hidden bases were carved into asteroids, warships repaired in secret hangars, and soldiers trained in remote colonies beyond the Queen's immediate reach. And at the center of it all stood Captain Marcus Hale, once the man who returned the cursed blade, now the symbol of defiance. Marcus stood in a war council aboard a hidden station orbiting a dying star. Around him sat leaders from alien species who had once suffered under the Queen's rule. Some were scarred, others broken, but all carried the fire of vengeance. They argued among themselves, their voices sharp, their distrust clear. Many still remembered the cruelty of humanity's past and asked why they should follow a human now. Marcus let them speak, his silence heavy, his eyes burning with resolve. When the chamber finally grew quiet, he spoke. We are all hunted. We are all marked as slaves in her eyes. It does not matter if you're human or not. She will destroy us all, unless we stand together. He placed a small object on the table, a piece of metal, ancient and inscribed with the same runes as the cursed blade. This was found in the ruins of a forgotten human colony, and it proves what the Queen fears most. The blade was not hers. It was not born of her people. It was forged by humanity long ago. Shock spread across the council. Whispers filled the chamber, and some alien leaders leaned closer, their suspicion turning into curiosity. Marcus continued, his voice calm but unyielding. The weapon was ours before it was hers, and if it was forged once, it can be undone. We must uncover its secrets, or none of us will survive. Beyond the chamber, the resistance grew. Freed slaves joined the ranks. Deserters from the Queen's armies carried maps and codes. Smugglers smuggled weapons not for profit, but for rebellion. Each act of defiance was small, but together they became a storm. And the Queen felt it, like an itch beneath her skin, a whisper in the back of her mind that grew louder each day. Her blade promised her endless power, but it also whispered of the danger of defiance. It urged her to crush Marcus quickly, before his storm became a fire that consumed the galaxy. Marcus himself knew the storm was dangerous. For every ally gained, another threatened betrayal. Some leaders whispered of surrender, others of using the cursed power for themselves. But Marcus reminded them that the curse served no one, it devoured. And slowly, painfully, he bound them together, not with promises of victory, but with the truth that there was no choice but to fight. The resistance began to strike harder. Ships darted into enemy space, sabotaging war machines before they could fully awaken. Colonies rose in rebellion, planting banners of defiance where once there was silence. The Queen's fleets were powerful, but they were stretched thin. For the first time in centuries, her empire bled. From her throne of bone and crystal, Queen Zyra raged. She could feel the storm gathering against her. Her silver eyes narrowed, and the cursed blade pulsed with restless hunger. She whispered to it in the dead of night, asking for visions, asking for certainty. And it answered her with fire and screams, showing her not just victory, but also a shadow. The shadow of a man who would stand against her until the stars themselves fell. Marcus Hale haunted her thoughts, and though she mocked him as an insect, a seed of doubt grew. The storm built day by day. The resistance was no longer a whisper, no longer a handful of raids. It was an army, scarred but unbroken, scattered but united. And as the galaxy turned its eyes to the coming war, Marcus stood on the command deck of his ship, watching the stars. His heart was heavy with the weight of what was to come, but in his eyes burned defiance stronger than ever. He whispered to himself, words only the void could hear. She may shake the stars with her wrath, but we will become the storm that refuses to bow. And so the gathering storm spread its wings across the galaxy. Darkness and light twisting together, war rising like thunder. The storm of rebellion was growing, but storms often carried lightning that struck where least expected. For every ally Marcus gained, whispers of doubt lingered. Not every voice in the council was loyal. Not every hand extended in alliance was clean. The Queen's shadow reached far, and it touched even the hearts of those Marcus trusted most. Marcus Hale stood at the command deck of the Resistance flagship. The ship hummed with new life, its hangars filled with fighters, its halls echoing with footsteps of humans and aliens alike. The rebellion had become an army, scarred but determined, and Marcus felt the weight of responsibility pressing heavier with every passing day. He knew Queen Zyra's wrath was relentless, but he also knew that betrayal often struck harder than any fleet. Among his closest circle was Admiral Karan Vey, a human officer who had fought at Marcus's side in battles long before the curse had awakened. Karan was sharp, decisive, and his strategies had saved thousands of lives. Many in the rebellion looked to him with the same trust they gave Marcus. And Marcus himself considered Karan a brother in arms. Yet in the quiet shadows of the galaxy, Karan carried a secret heavier than steel. The Queen had spoken to him, not through words, but through visions carried by the cursed blade. At first they were dreams, distant and unclear, promises of order and glory. But the more he listened, the stronger they became, until finally he believed, not in Marcus's defiance, but in the Queen's inevitability. He told himself it was survival, not betrayal. Yet deep inside he knew the truth. The rebellion's next strike was bold, a plan to assault one of the Queen's shipyards where her cursed fleets were being awakened. It was a chance to cripple her forces before they fully spread. The council argued for days, but finally, under Marcus's command, the decision was made. Hundreds of ships prepared for war, their crews ready to risk everything. On the eve of battle, Marcus stood with Karan in the war room. The stars glowed across the holographic maps, their light marking the paths of fleets. Marcus spoke with the certainty of a leader, but behind his eyes was the burden of sacrifice. Tomorrow we strike not just for ourselves, but for every world she has chained. If we fall knowing we stood. Karan nodded, his face calm, his voice steady, but in his heart, the curse whispered, urging him to act. The battle began in fire and fury. The Resistance fleet burst into the shipyard's orbit, weapons blazing, fighters swarming like a tide of vengeance. For a moment, it seemed as though they would win. The Queen's guardians faltered under the sudden assault, and explosions lit up the void. Marcus stood at the helm, giving orders with clarity, his crew fighting with courage that shook even seasoned enemies. But then it happened. Admiral Karan gave a signal, one Marcus never expected. Entire wings of Resistance ships turned suddenly, their cannons firing not at the Queen's fleet, but at their own. In the chaos, the rebellion fractured, trust shattered in an instant. The Queen's fleets surged forward, exploiting the betrayal with merciless precision. Marcus's flagship shook under the barrage, alarms screaming, the bridge drowning in chaos. His officers shouted in panic, demanding to know why their own allies were firing on them. Marcus's heart froze as realization struck. Karan's betrayal was not just a wound. It was a blade driven into the very heart of the Resistance. Through the flames of battle, Queen Zyra's laughter echoed across the calms. Cold, cruel, victorious. Did you truly think the storm you gather could not be broken? She taunted. You humans betray yourselves better than I ever could. The rebellion collapsed into retreat. Ships scattered into the void, hunted and broken. The dream of victory that had seemed so close now lay in ashes. Marcus's flagship limped away, its hull torn, its crew wounded, its spirit battered. For the first time since the war began, despair sank deep into their hearts. Karan, now at the Queen's side, justified his betrayal as necessary. He told himself Marcus's war was doomed, that siding with Zyra would save what remained of humanity. But in truth, he was already a prisoner of the cursed whispers, bound by the same chains that held the Queen herself. Marcus, hiding in the shadows of a ruined system, stood among the survivors. His face was lined with grief, his voice heavy with the weight of failure. The rebellion had been betrayed, crushed in fire, scattered among the stars. But though the storm had been broken, the spark was not gone. In the silence of that dark moment, Marcus whispered to himself, "She thinks betrayal ends us, but it will only make us stronger. We will rise again, even from ashes." And so, amid the betrayal in the stars, the war entered its darkest hour. The Queen believed she had broken the Resistance, but she had only tested it. For storms do not end with a single strike. They gather again, fiercer than before. The betrayal had shattered the rebellion. Ships scattered across the void, leaders silenced, entire outposts erased in fire. The Queen's laughter echoed through every corner of the galaxy, carried on signals and screams. To her, the storm had broken, and now nothing remained but dust. With the cursed blade in her hand, Queen Zyra rose to heights unseen in centuries. Her body was no longer bound by flesh alone. The curse seeped into her veins, her skin glowing with threads of silver fire, her eyes burning brighter than stars. She was more than a queen now, more than an alien ruler. She had become something monstrous, something divine. Her people bowed, not out of loyalty, but out of terror, for to gaze upon her was to see the curse itself living within her. She raised the blade high above her throne world, and the skies split open. Storms of black fire spread across the heavens, swallowing light, twisting the very fabric of space. Planets trembled as her voice rang out, commanding fleets that no longer needed captains. Her ships moved like extensions of her will, the curse flowing through their cores. One by one, worlds fell, entire civilizations reduced to ashes within days. Armies that resisted turned to dust under her wrath. Oceans boiled, mountains crumbled, and suns dimmed under her shadow. From the ruins of the Resistance, Marcus Hale watched these horrors unfold. He sat in the war-scarred chamber of a hidden asteroid base, his body bruised, his spirit battered. Reports poured in, each one worse than the last, entire systems gone, billions enslaved or dead. His officers argued around him, their voices breaking under the weight of despair. Some said to surrender, others said to scatter and survive as shadows. But Marcus listened in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with unbroken fire. Finally, he stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. We cannot surrender, we cannot vanish. If we do, then everything we fought for dies with us. The Queen thinks her wrath will break us, but we will show her that humanity does not break, it endures. His words silenced the chamber, not with promises of victory, but with the raw weight of defiance. And though the rebellion was in ruins, those who remained felt the spark reignite. Yet Marcus knew the truth. Against her unleashed power, they could not win with ships and soldiers alone. The Queen had become one with the curse, and to defeat her, he needed to strike at the blade itself. The artifact she believed made her a goddess, the same weapon that bound her to destruction. Somewhere in its creation was a secret, and Marcus swore he would uncover it. Meanwhile, Queen Zyra reveled in her transformation. Her fleets crushed resistance cells without mercy. Her laughter carried across conquered worlds. But deep within her, the whispers of the blade grew louder. They no longer spoke with devotion, but with hunger, urging her to burn faster, to destroy more, to consume without end. The curse was not her servant. It was her master, and though she denied it, cracks began to show. Her moments of silence grew longer, her rage more sudden, her armies sometimes turning on themselves as the curse spread too far. Marcus saw these signs, faint but real. He realized her greatest weapon was also her weakness. If he could push her wrath far enough, the curse might devour her as it had devoured countless others. But to do that, he would need to face her again, to stand before her when the galaxy itself trembled. The rebellion slowly rebuilt in the shadows. Ships repaired, allies gathered once more, and whispers spread through enslaved worlds that Marcus still lived, that the human who stood against the Queen had not fallen. Hope, faint but stubborn, returned like embers in the dark. Every strike against her fleets was not a victory of strength, but of spirit, a reminder that she had not crushed them completely. And with each act of defiance, Queen Zyra's fury grew. She unleashed storms of cursed fire upon entire systems, destroying not only her enemies, but her own empire's worlds. Her wrath had no direction now, no balance. It was a storm that consumed everything. Her own commanders began to whisper in fear, wondering if their queen had lost herself to the blade. But none dared to speak aloud, for even a whisper against her was answered with instant death. Marcus prepared for the inevitable. The queen's wrath would not stop, and sooner or later, she would come for him. He stood on the bridge of his ship, staring into the stars that burned under her shadow. His reflection in the glass was weary, scarred, but unbroken. She thinks she is wrath itself, he murmured, but she is only the curse's prisoner, and prisoners can be freed or destroyed. The galaxy trembled as her wrath spread. But within that storm, defiance refused to die. And though Queen Zyra believed herself unstoppable, a reckoning was coming. A final clash where wrath and resistance would decide the fate of the stars. The galaxy was burning. Worlds lay in ruin, stars dimmed under the Queen's shadow, and entire civilizations bent their knees or crumbled into ash. Queen Zyra stood at the center of it all, her body fused with the curse, her voice echoing across the stars like a storm. She was no longer just a ruler, no longer just an enemy. She had become a living weapon of destruction, a force that defied reason. Yet amid the fire and despair, defiance remained. The rebellion, though broken and betrayed, still lived. Scattered fleets gathered once more, drawn to a single promise whispered across the void. That Marcus Hale, the human who had returned the cursed blade and lived to defy its master, would rise again. Hope returned in fragments, fragile yet unstoppable. And from those fragments, an army was born one last time. Marcus stood aboard his flagship, the scars of war carved across its hull. His face was weary, lined with the weight of failure and sacrifice, but his eyes burned with steady fire. He knew the queen would come for him. He knew the curse itself hungered to see him fall. And so he prepared for the final stand, not with certainty of victory, but with the will to fight until the last star burned. The queen's flagship loomed like a shadow across the heavens, a vessel of twisted bone and black crystal, alive with the curse's whispers. Her fleets surrounded Marcus's rebellion, outnumbering them 10-1. Her voice thundered across every calm. Your storm is over. Your defiance ends here. Kneel, and perhaps I will let your ashes remember peace. Marcus answered not with surrender, but with silence. He stared into the void where her fleet gathered, and in that silence his crew found strength. He finally spoke, his word not just to his ship, but to the entire rebellion. She believes her wrath makes her eternal, but wrath cannot rule forever. Today we remind the stars that humanity does not kneel. We fight, we endure, we defy. A roar answered him across the fleet, not of fear, but of courage. The battle began with fire. The Queen's cursed fleets surged forward, their weapons tearing through space with unnatural fury. The resistance answered with everything they had, every cannon, every fighter, every ounce of will. Ships exploded, screams filled the calms, but the rebellion did not break. Every fallen vessel became a shield for the next, every loss a reason to strike harder. On her flagship, Queen Zyra raised the cursed blade, its whispers now screams. She poured herself into its power, her body glowing with unstoppable energy. Her voice cut through the chaos, promising annihilation. Yet even as her fleets crushed ship after ship, she felt a presence. Marcus Hale was coming for her. Marcus led a strike team through the storm, his small vessel weaving between fire and wreckage. They tore through defenses, pushing toward her flagship with reckless resolve. Every barrier fell, every wall cracked, until at last he stood before her throne once more. The chamber was the same, yet different, darker, twisted by the curse. Queen Zyra rose to meet him, her form no longer fully alien, no longer fully alive. She was a living storm, and yet her silver eyes burned with pride and rage. You return again, human, she hissed, her voice layered with 1,000 whispers. Do you come to kneel, or to die? Marcus stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I come to end this, not for me, not for humanity, but for every world you have broken, for every voice you have silenced. She raised the blade, and the chamber shook. Energy tore through the air, shadows screamed. The floor cracked beneath their feet. Marcus staggered, but did not fall. He shouted over the storm, his words like thunder. You are not wrath, you are a prisoner of the curse, and today that prison ends. The blade pulsed violently. It remembered his touch. It remembered that he was the one who returned it willingly. And in that memory lay the truth. The curse could only be broken by choice, by sacrifice. Marcus stepped closer, even as her power tore at his body, burning his skin, crushing his bones. He seized the blade with his bare hands, his scream echoing through the chamber as the curse tore at him. The queen fought to hold it, her power surging, her fury blinding. But the blade trembled, caught between two wills, one fueled by endless wrath, the other by unyielding defiance. And in that clash, the stars themselves seemed to shake. With one final cry, Marcus forced the blade downward. Its energy shattered, its whispers silenced, its curse broken in a flash of light so bright it swallowed the chamber. Queen Zyra screamed as the power she thought was hers consumed her instead. Her form fractured, torn apart by the very curse she had claimed to command. And her form fractured, torn apart by the very curse she had claimed to command. And then there was silence. When the light faded, Marcus knelt on the shattered floor, the blade gone, the queen vanished. Around him, the palace crumbled, the curse dissolved, and across the galaxy the Queen's fleets fell silent. The war machines froze, the chains of slaves shattered, the storm ended. The rebellion had not won by strength, but by defiance. Marcus's body was broken, his breath shallow, but in his eyes the fire still burned. He had not fought for glory, nor for survival, but for the right of every being to live free. As the last stones of the throne chamber collapsed, his voice whispered into the silence. Humanity does not kneel, and though the stars were scarred, though billions have been lost, hope returned. The curse was broken, the Queen was gone, and in the void of her wrath, the galaxy was free.